All right, so today we're going to be taking a deep dive into Mark Manson's The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Feck.
Oh, yeah.
And honestly, the title alone kind of throws you for a loop, right? Like, is this going to be about just being apathetic?
Right.
But before you think it's all about apathy, it's actually quite the opposite.
Yeah.
We've got his book and some notes to help us pull out the most interesting insights.
Awesome.
So are you ready to dig in?
Absolutely. Yeah. This book is like a treasure trove of counterintuitive wisdom.
Yeah.
Manson challenges us to rethink our priorities, to question what we truly value, and ultimately to find freedom in not giving a feck about the things that don't truly matter.
Okay, so let's unpack this a little bit.
Yeah.
He starts with Charles Bukowski.
Right.
This writer, known for being, well, kind of a mess.
Yeah.
Success, yeah. But definitely not your typical self-help guru.
Exactly.
Like, what is he doing in this book?
So Manson uses Bukowski's story, culminating with that incredible tombstone inscription, "Don't try,"
Right.
to make a point.
Yeah.
Think about it. The inscription flies in the face of everything we're told about striving for success.
Exactly.
But Manson suggests that by accepting ourselves,
Right.
flaws and all, we can tap into a different kind of success, one that's rooted in authenticity.
So it's more about embracing who you are not some idealized version of yourself.
Yes.
But how does that translate into not giving a feck?
Right.
It seems almost passive.
That's where the feedback loop from hell comes in.
Okay.
You know that feeling when you get anxious about being anxious?
Yeah.
Or feel guilty for feeling guilty?
Oh, yeah.
It's this vicious cycle.
Manson
argues that by simply acknowledging those negative feelings without judgment,
Right.
we can actually break free.
Oh.
Instead of getting sucked into that spiral,
Yeah.
we can choose to accept those feelings and move on.
So instead of trying to suppress or ignore negative emotions,
Right.
which most self-help books tell us to do,
Exactly.
it suggests we just sit with them.
Precisely.
Okay.
Think of it this way.
Yeah.
Have you ever tried to force yourself to not think about a pink elephant?
Of course. What
Right.
happens?
You think about a pink elephant,
Exactly.
but I still don't see how that helps me figure out what to give a feck about
Right.
and what to let go of.
That's where the real work begins.
Okay.
It's about identifying what truly matters to you.
Okay.
What are your values? What kind of person do you want to be?
Right.
Once you have those answers,
Yeah.
you can start letting go of the things that don't align with your core values.
Okay, so what are some examples?
Think about all the things you stress over.
Yeah.
Maybe it's trying to please everyone, chasing external validation,
Right.
or worrying about things you can't control.
Yeah.
What if you just stopped?
It's a radical idea for sure.
But let's move on to another concept that initially seems a bit strange.
Yeah.
Manson's idea that happiness is a problem-solving activity.
Okay.
He even uses this character Disappointment Panda to illustrate the point.
Oh, yeah.
Can you explain that a bit?
Sure. So Disappointment Panda is kind of like a humorous way to deliver a serious message.
Okay.
He embodies the idea that avoiding problems actually makes us more miserable in the long run.
Okay.
It might seem counterintuitive,
Yeah.
but even those bad feelings,
Yeah.
whether it's disappointment, sadness, or even physical pain, they serve a purpose.
Okay.
They're signals that something needs to change.
So how does that tie into problem solving?
Okay.
I mean, stubbing your toe is painful,
Uh-huh.
but it doesn't necessarily make me happy to move my foot.
True, but the act of moving your foot is the solution to the problem of pain.
Right.
And the relief you feel when the pain subsides, that's a form of happiness.
Okay.
The same principle applies to emotional challenges. Think about a time you faced a difficult situation, maybe a conflict at work or a personal setback.
Yeah.
Working through those challenges, even if it's painful in the moment,
Yeah.
ultimately leads to growth and a sense of accomplishment.
I'm starting to see the connection.
Yeah.
So it's not about avoiding problems. It's about seeing them as opportunities for growth and learning.
Exactly.
So would you say then that happiness comes from overcoming those challenges?
Exactly.
Okay.
It's about actively engaging with life's problems.
Right.
And finding solutions that align with our values and goals.
Okay.
And that's where Manson introduces the concept of good problems.
Okay.
Challenges we choose to take on because they are meaningful to us.
Okay, now this is where it gets really interesting for our listeners.
Yeah.
We've talked about letting go of things that don't matter and reframing problems as opportunities.
Right.
But how do we know what good problems to choose?
Right.
How do we ensure we're not just creating more unnecessary suffering for ourselves?
Yeah. That's where Manson's concept of values and metrics comes in.
Okay.
He argues that we often choose the wrong metrics to measure our success,
Okay.
which leads to unnecessary suffering.
Okay, break that down for me.
Sure.
What exactly are values and metrics?
Okay, so think of it this way.
Yeah.
Your values are your guiding principles,
Okay.
the things that are truly important to you.
Mm-hmm.
Metrics are how you measure your progress towards those values.
Okay.
So, for example, if you value family,
Right.
but you constantly measure your success based on, how often you see your siblings,
Right.
you might feel like you're failing,
Yeah.
even if your relationship is strong.
So it's not just about having the right values. It's also about choosing the right yardstick to measure your progress.
Exactly.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Do you have an example of how this plays out in real life?
Manson uses these contrasting stories of Dave Mustaine and Pete Best
Okay.
to illustrate this point.
Okay.
Mustaine, the guitarist, who was kicked out of Metallica right before they hit it big,
Yeah.
went on to form Megadeth,
Right.
a successful band in its own right.
Yeah.
But he spent his entire career comparing himself to Metallica,
Right.
measuring his success against theirs.
So even though he achieved a level of success many musicians only dream of,
Yeah,
he still felt like a failure because he was using the wrong metric.
exactly.
Wow.
On the other hand, you have Pete Best,
Okay.
the drummer who was fired from the Beatles.
Right before they hit it big.
Right before they hit it big,
Yeah.
he could have easily wallowed in bitterness and regret,
Yeah.
but instead he chose to focus on different metrics.
Yeah.
He valued family stability and personal happiness.
Okay.
And by those measures,
Yeah.
he considered himself incredibly successful.
Wow, those are two very different ways of looking at success.
Right.
It really highlights how our choice of metrics can drastically impact our happiness.
Absolutely.
So for our listener, how can they identify if they're using the wrong metrics in their own lives? What questions should they be asking themselves?
So start by identifying your core values. What are the things that are truly important to you?
Mm-hmm.
Then look at how you're currently measuring your success in those areas.
Okay.
Are your metrics aligned with your values?
Right.
Or are you setting yourself up for disappointment by chasing goals that don't truly matter?
This is such a valuable insight.
It is.
It's not just about achieving success. It's about defining what success means to you on your own terms.
Exactly.
But even when we have the right values and metrics,
Right.
we still mess up sometimes.
We do.
We make mistakes, we hurt others, and we experience setbacks.
Yeah.
That's where Manson's idea of taking responsibility comes in, right?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Manson differentiates between blame and responsibility.
Okay.
We often blame others for our misfortunes,
Mhm.
but taking responsibility means owning our choices and actions, even when they lead to negative consequences.
And he uses a pretty intense personal anecdote to drive this point home.
Yeah.
His experience of being interrogated by the school principal for drugs he didn't have.
Right.
Oh, wow.
He was only 13 years old,
Oh, my gosh.
sitting in the principal's office, sweating and terrified, even though he knew he was innocent.
That must have been incredibly unsettling.
It was.
But how does that experience connect to the broader idea of responsibility?
So Manson realized that his family's habit of avoiding difficult conversations and bottling up emotions contributed to this feeling of being wrongly accused.
Okay.
They created this facade of like, everything's fine,
Right.
which led to this sense of entitlement
Okay.
and an inability to deal with challenging situations.
So it wasn't just about that specific incident. It was about a pattern of avoiding responsibility
Yes.
that ultimately made him feel like a victim.
Precisely.
Wow.
And this avoidance of responsibility is something we see all around us.
Right.
Manson even coined the term victimhood chic
Yeah.
to describe this phenomenon, where people become addicted to feeling offended and morally superior.
Right.
It becomes a way to avoid dealing with their own issues and taking responsibility for their own lives.
It's almost like wearing your pain as a badge of honor.
It is.
But how does that hinder progress?
Think about it.
Okay.
If you're constantly focused on being a victim,
Right.
you're not focused on finding solutions.
Right.
You're stuck in a cycle of blame and resentment.
Right.
And that's the opposite of taking responsibility.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
So how do we shift from this blame game to a mindset of responsibility?
Okay.
How do we break free from victimhood chic?
Manson suggests this simple but powerful analogy.
Okay.
A car accident.
Okay.
You can't control if someone runs a red light and crashes into you.
Right.
But you can control how you respond.
Right.
You can choose to learn from the experience, take steps to prevent it from happening again,
Right.
and focus on your recovery.
It's about focusing on what we can control rather than dwelling on things we can't.
Exactly.
So it seems like taking responsibility is essential for personal growth.
It is.
But Manson also throws us another curveball.
Yeah.
The idea that we are all wrong all the time.
Oh, yeah.
That's a pretty humbling thought, isn't it?
It is.
He uses this fascinating experiment
Yeah.
where participants are presented with a series of buttons
Right.
and told to figure out a sequence that makes a light flash,
Okay.
indicating they've earned a point.
Uh-huh.
The catch is
Yeah.
there is no pattern.
Right.
The points are assigned randomly,
Yes.
yet people still create these elaborate theories about what they're doing.
Right.
So they're creating meaning where there is none.
Yeah.
That's both hilarious and a little disconcerting.
It is. It makes you wonder, how often do we do that in our own lives?
All the time.
Right.
Our brains are wired to find patterns
Mm-hmm.
and make sense of the world,
Right.
even when there is no inherent meaning.
So Manson uses this experiment to highlight the fallibility of our thinking.
Right.
Our memories are unreliable.
Yeah.
Our perceptions are skewed by biases. And we constantly create narratives that fit our existing beliefs.
It's like that game of telephone where the message gets distorted as it's passed along.
Exactly.
Speaking of distorted memories,
Sure, yeah.
Manson also discusses the case of Meredith,
Oh, wow.
a woman who developed this false memory of being abused by her father.
Right.
This case is particularly compelling
It is.
because it demonstrates how easily our minds can create false narratives,
Right.
especially when influenced by external factors.
Exactly.
So Meredith's strained relationship with her father, her history of troubled relationships with men,
Right.
and her exposure to research on child abuse
Yeah.
all contributed to the formation of this false memory.
Yeah. It's a really interesting case.
It's a cautionary tale about the power of suggestion
Yes.
and the need to approach our own memories with a healthy dose of skepticism.
Absolutely.
But if we're all wrong all the time,
Yeah.
does that mean we should just give up on trying to understand anything?
Not at all.
Okay.
Manson suggests that the solution is to embrace doubt,
Okay.
to constantly question our assumptions,
Yeah.
be open to new information, and acknowledge that we don't have all the answers.
So instead of clinging to certainty,
Right.
we should be comfortable with uncertainty.
Exactly.
Okay.
Certainty can be paralyzing.
Okay.
It closes us off to new possibilities
Right.
and prevents us from learning and growing.
Yeah.
Doubt, on the other hand,
Yeah.
is a catalyst for exploration and discovery.
Okay.
It allows us to see the world with fresh eyes
Right.
and to be open to different perspectives.
This ties back nicely to Manson's earlier point about choosing our struggles.
It does.
He tells the story of an insurance adjuster
Oh, yeah.
who dreams of being a screenwriter,
Right.
but is too terrified to try.
Yeah.
It's something I think many of us can relate to.
Absolutely.
We have those secret aspirations
Yeah.
that we're afraid to pursue.
Right.
But Manson challenges us to ask ourselves,
Mm-hmm.
what pain are we willing to endure?
Right.
What are we struggling for?
He suggests that the struggles we choose ultimately define who we are
Okay.
and what we accomplish in life.
Right.
And those struggles inevitably involve failure,
Yeah.
which is why he dedicates an entire chapter to the importance of embracing failure as a necessary part of growth.
He even shares his own experiences
Right.
of finding freedom and opportunity in failure.
Yeah.
So he graduated college during the Great Recession
Mm-hmm.
and basically started his adult life at rock bottom.
Yeah. But he saw that as an advantage.
Oh, wow.
He had nothing to lose.
Right.
So he was willing to take risks and try new things, even if they failed.
Right.
And that's exactly what he did,
Yeah.
launching his blog and eventually building a successful writing career.
It's a testament to the power of embracing failure as a stepping stone to success. It's like the saying goes, sometimes you win, sometimes you learn.
Exactly.
And speaking of learning,
Yeah.
Manson highlights the example of Pablo Picasso,
Right.
who continued to produce art throughout his long life,
Yeah.
constantly experimenting and evolving his style.
So Picasso was driven by this pure value of honest expression.
Okay.
It wasn't about achieving some external goal.
Right.
It was about the process itself, the act of creation.
Okay.
And this emphasizes a crucial point.
Okay.
Action often precedes inspiration.
Right.
We often wait for motivation to strike
Yeah.
before taking action.
Right.
But Manson suggests flipping that script.
Okay.
Just do something, anything,
Yeah.
and let that action spark inspiration and motivation.
It's like building momentum.
It is.
That's a great reminder for our listeners.
Yeah.
What small step can they take right now towards something they care about? What action can they take to build momentum toward their goals?
Sometimes the hardest part is simply starting, but once you take that first step, even if it's a small one,
right,
you create momentum that can carry you forward.
Yeah.
And that momentum can help you push through the inevitable failures and setbacks you'll encounter along the way.
It's like that quote, "The journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step."
Exactly.
And speaking of journeys,
Yeah.
Manson takes us on quite a profound one in his chapter, "And Then You Die."
Right.
It's a topic that most people shy away from,
Yeah.
but he tackles it head on.
He does.
He begins by sharing a deeply personal story about the death of his friend Josh,
Right.
a loss that shook him to his core and forced him to confront the fragility of life.
Yeah, it was a pivotal moment for Manson.
Yeah.
It really prompted him to reevaluate his priorities and embrace a more authentic way of living. Yeah, it was a pivotal moment for Manson.
It's a powerful reminder that none of us are guaranteed tomorrow.
Right?
Did this experience change how Manson approached his own life?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
How so? So he even recounts this incredibly vivid dream where Josh essentially asks him,
Okay.
why care that I'm dead when you're so afraid to live?
Wow.
And that really shook him.
Yeah.
It pushed Manson to start taking more risks, pursuing his passions, and living more fully in the present moment.
Wow, that's quite a wake-up call.
It is.
It makes you think about what you might be putting off because of fear or uncertainty.
Yeah.
But Manson doesn't just share his personal experience. He also delves into the work of Ernest Becker,
Right.
this anthropologist who explored the concept of death terror.
Mm-hmm.
Can you tell us more about Becker's work and how it relates to Manson's message?
Okay, so Becker argued that our awareness of death,
Okay.
this death terror, profoundly shapes our behavior.
Okay.
We create what he called immortality projects.
Immortality projects.
Ways to leave a lasting legacy
Okay.
and transcend our physical death.
Okay, so like what are some examples of that?
Think of things like building a business,
Yeah.
having children, creating art, or making significant contributions to society. These projects provide a sense of meaning and purpose that extends beyond our lifespan.
So these immortality projects are attempts to create something that outlasts us,
Exactly.
a way to ensure our lives had meaning.
Yes,
But it sounds like Becker also saw a potential downside to these projects.
he did.
What was that?
Becker argued that these projects can become problematic
Okay.
if we cling to them too tightly.
Okay.
They can lead to anxiety neuroses and a fear of failure
Okay.
because our sense of self-worth becomes tied to these external achievements.
So almost like defining yourself by your achievements.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So Manson builds on this idea,
Okay.
suggesting that it's not about rejecting the pursuit of meaning and legacy, but
right.
rather about approaching these pursuits with a healthy perspective.
So it's about finding a balance between striving for something meaningful
Yes.
while also accepting the impermanence of life.
Exactly.
How does Manson suggest we navigate this delicate balance?
He encourages us to acknowledge death, not with fear, but with a sense of acceptance and even gratitude.
It sounds paradoxical.
It does.
But confronting our mortality can actually be incredibly liberating.
It can.
And he uses his experience of standing on a cliff at the Cape of Good Hope,
Oh, yeah.
looking out at this vast expanse of the ocean to illustrate this point.
Yes. He describes this incredible feeling of exhilaration and clarity,
Okay.
a sense of being fully present and connected to something larger than himself.
Wow.
It was as if facing the immensity of the ocean and by extension, the immensity of life and death
Yeah.
allowed him to let go of the trivial worries that clutter our minds.
It's like standing at the edge of existence gives you a whole new perspective on what truly matters.
It does.
It reminds me of that quote, "Life is too short to be anything but happy."
Yeah.
But how do we cultivate that sense of presence and appreciation in our everyday lives?
Right.
Do we all need to go stand on a cliff?
Well, maybe not literally,
Okay.
but the idea is to find ways to connect with that feeling of awe and wonder, to appreciate the simple fact of being alive.
Okay.
It might be through spending time in nature,
Yeah.
pursuing creative endeavors, or simply savoring the small moments of joy in our daily routines.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into the subtle art of not giving a feck,
Yeah.
what are the key takeaways you hope our listener will walk away with?
I think Manson's message is ultimately about finding freedom.
Freedom.
Freedom from the pressure to conform to societal expectations.
Okay.
Freedom from the tyranny of our own negative thoughts.
Uh-huh.
And freedom from the fear of death.
It's about choosing our struggles, wisely taking responsibility for our lives, and ultimately finding meaning in the face of our own mortality.
Exactly.
And he reminds us that we are all capable of greatness,
Yes.
not by achieving some arbitrary standard of success,
Right.
but simply by choosing what to care about in this messy, unpredictable, and ultimately finite existence.
Well said.
So to our listener, maybe take a moment to ask yourself,
Yeah.
what will your legacy be? How will the world be different because you lived?
Right.
What can you do starting today to make that legacy a reality?
It's been a really insightful journey exploring these ideas.
It has.
Thanks for diving in with us.
Absolutely. And to our listener, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep choosing what to give a feck about.
Yeah.
You never know what amazing things you might discover along the way.